My golden child brother destroyed my life for years without consequences, but when he stole my truck, drunk on Christmas, I sent him to jail and left my parents bankrupt. I'm 21 years old. I work at a warehouse and live in my Uncle Eugene's renovated basement, and I need to tell this story because after years of putting up with my brother's shit and my parents protecting him, everything finally exploded in the most perfect and karmic way you can imagine. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, part of me is still processing everything that happened, but the other part is like, finally, you know? Finally, there were real consequences for Colton, and it wasn't because of something I did or said, but because of his own stupid decisions. I guess I should start at the beginning. When we were kids, Colton is a year older than me. He's 22 now, and for as long as I can remember, he's been my parents' golden child, especially my mom Helen's. And when I say golden child, I don't mean they bought him more toys or let him stay up later. I mean this guy could literally do whatever he wanted without consequences. When we were like 8 and 9 years old, Colton grabbed my game. Boy, that transparent purple one my grandmother gave me before she died, and threw it down the stairs because he was mad that I wouldn't lend him my Pokemon game. It broke into pieces. The screen shattered. And when I told my mom crying, she basically told me I should have lent him the game and that brothers need to share. Can you believe it? Colton destroys my thing, and somehow it's my fault for not sharing. That was like the first time out of 1,000 that happened. When I was 12, I bought myself with my own money. Money I earned, mowing lawns all summer. A used BMX bike. I loved it. It was metallic blue and had some cool stickers I put on myself. Colton took it without permission to go to a friend's house, did some stupid stunt trying to do a trick, and left it all bent up. The front wheel was literally twisted into a taco shape. When I confronted my parents, my dad, Brian, told me it was an accident and that I was overreacting, that it was just an old used bike anyway. I used my money to buy it, my literal summer sweat, and to them it didn't matter because Colton didn't mean to break it, you know what I mean? The intention didn't change the fact that my bike was destroyed and I had no way to get anywhere. This went on and on. In middle school, I saved up like $300 from odd jobs and bought myself a second-hand iPod Touch. Colton grabbed it from my room, took it to a party. Someone stole it or he lost it drunk. I never really knew what happened. And my parents told me I shouldn't leave valuable things where Colton could take them. I mean, seriously? In my own room? But of course, they never made him pay for anything, never punished him, nothing. When I turned 16 and got a part-time job at an auto parts store, I started saving in secret, hiding money in places I knew Colton would never find. Because yeah, that's how bad things were. At 18, right after graduating high school, the incident happened that made me leave my parents' house. I had bought a used laptop, nothing fancy, like a Dell that cost me about $400, but that I needed for classes I was going to take at community college. I had it on my desk, was using it to do homework, and had to go to the bathroom. When I came back, Colton was in my room. He had spilled a glass of soda on top of the laptop and was trying to clean it with his shirt. He basically fried it completely. The screen wouldn't turn on. The keyboard was sticky. Everything lost. I got furious, yelled at him, and he just laughed and said it was an accident, that I should be more careful with my stuff, in my room, that he invaded. I went downstairs yelling to where my parents were, told them what happened, demanded that Colton pay me for the laptop because I needed it for school starting in 2 weeks. My mom looked at me like I was the problem and said, "Why do you always have to cause drama, Adrian?" Colton said, "It was an accident, and you know he doesn't have money right now." And that's when something in me broke. You know, that moment where you realize that no matter what happens, you're never gonna win, they're never gonna defend you, you're always gonna be the scapegoat. I told my mom I was fed up, that Colton had been destroying and stealing my stuff for years and she never did anything, and she told me that if I didn't like how things were in her house, I could leave. So I left. I called my Uncle Eugene, my mom's older brother, and asked him if I could stay with him a few days while I found something. Eugene is a cool guy. He was a cop for like 30 years before retiring, never married or had kids, and was always the only adult in my family who seemed to see things as they really were. He told me I could stay as long as I needed, that he had plenty of space. I packed all my stuff that same night. I mean, The little I had that Colton hadn't already destroyed and moved into Eugene's basement. He had renovated it years ago with a full bathroom and everything, so it was basically a mini apartment. He told me I didn't have to pay rent if I helped with house chores and errands, and that seemed more than fair to me. Living with Eugene completely changed my life. Honestly. He treated me like an adult, with respect, and when I told him the whole story about Colton and my parents, he just shook his head and said, "Your mom was always one to spoil whoever screamed the loudest, since they were kids." I felt validated for the first time in my life, you know? Like I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. It really had been unfair all that time. Eugene helped me get my current job at the warehouse. One of his friends was a manager there, and I started full-time making a decent salary. I took some online classes for college, nothing intense but enough to keep me moving forward. And this is where the jewel of the story comes in, my beloved truck. When I turned 19, Eugene told me he had something for me. He took me to the garage and there it was. His old 2008 Ford F-150. Dark blue, with some dents and scratches, but running perfectly. He told me he had just bought himself a new truck, and that the F-150 was mine if I wanted it. I almost started crying right there, like this was the biggest gift anyone had ever given me. The truck became my pride, my independence, my freedom. I took care of it like it was gold, washed it every week, did maintenance religiously, everything. It was mine. Something nobody had taken from me, that nobody had destroyed, that was completely mine. For like a year and a half, everything was fine. I still saw my parents occasionally, like on Thanksgiving and birthdays, but kept my distance. Colton had already crashed 2 cars. The first was a Honda Civic. My parents bought him when he turned 18, and that he totaled within 6 months driving like an idiot. And the second was an old Nissan he got from somewhere and also crashed doing I don't know what stupidity. My parents always bought him another car or paid for repairs, kept rescuing him, and I just watched from afar thinking, he's never gonna learn. About 8 months ago, Colton crashed his 3rd car. This time it was more serious, like he crashed into a light pole or something. The car was totaled, and although he came out uninjured, the insurance company was fed up with him and raised his premiums to a ridiculous level. My parents couldn't afford to buy him another car or pay those insurance rates. They had already spent a ton of their retirement money on previous cars, and then, obviously, they looked toward my truck. My mom called me and said Colton needed transportation to get to work, that I should lend him my truck just for a few weeks while he saved up to buy something. I said no, flat out no. That truck was mine, and knowing Colton's history with vehicles, there was no way I was lending it to him. She got mad, told me I was being selfish, that family helps each other, blah blah blah, the same old speech. I told her Colton should learn to face the consequences of his actions and hung up. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, I went to visit my parents for a family lunch. He was still trying to maintain some relationship, I guess. I left my truck parked on the street as always, keys in my pocket. After lunch, I went out and the truck wasn't there. I panicked, thought it had been stolen, was about to call the police when my mom, with the most casual face in the world, told me that Colton had borrowed it to go see a friend. I exploded. I asked her how the hell Colton had my truck keys, and that's when I found out that my parents had made a duplicate of the keys months ago when I left my keychain at their house once. I had left the keys like 5 minutes while I went to the bathroom or something, and they took the opportunity to make a copy. I couldn't believe it. My own mother had conspired so my brother could steal my truck. Colton came back like 4 hours later. The truck smelled like beer and weed. There was trash everywhere. The tank was almost empty. And there was a new scratch on the driver's door. I yelled at him, told him to never touch my truck again, and he just laughed and said, "Relax, man. I only used it a few hours." My parents told me I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal, that Colton just needed a favor. I drove the truck out of there as fast as I could, shaking with rage, and when I got to Eugene's house, I told him everything. He was furious, told me I should report the theft, but I didn't want to get the police involved because I still had that stupid hope that my parents would eventually see reason, you know? How naive I was. I changed the locks on my truck that same week, Didn't care about spending like $200 on a locksmith to make sure the old keys wouldn't work. I thought that would be enough, that I had finally protected what was mine. I went months without talking to my parents after that, ignored their calls, didn't respond to messages, nothing. Eugene supported me completely, told me that setting boundaries was healthy and necessary. Then came this year's Christmas. Eugene convinced me to go to Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house, said it was important to try, that family is family and blah blah blah. I agreed, but with conditions. I told Eugene that if anything happened, we were leaving immediately. We arrived around 6 inches the evening, December 24th. It was freezing cold outside, and it had already started snowing a little. Dinner was awkward. My parents acted like nothing had happened. Colton was on his phone the whole time, being the same asshole as always, and I just wanted it to end so I could leave. After dinner, we were in the living room, opening gifts, and I had my truck keys in my pants pocket. I always kept them there, never left them alone. I went to the bathroom, and this is important. I took my jacket with me because it was cold in that old house, but left my pants on, obviously. When I came out of the bathroom, Colton was standing right outside, in the hallway with a weird smile. It gave me a bad feeling, but I didn't think much of it. We went back to the living room, continued with gifts for another while, and around 9 at night, Eugene and I said we were leaving. We went outside. The weather was getting worse. It was snowing harder now, and when we got to where I had parked the truck, it wasn't there. Again. But this time I immediately knew what had happened. I put my hand in my pocket, and my keys weren't there. That son of a bitch Colton had somehow stolen my keys from me. Probably when I was in the bathroom, he took advantage of some moment of distraction. I don't know. But he took them. I went back into the house furious. Eugene behind me, and I yelled at Colton, "Where's my truck?" He said he had lent it to a friend who needed to move some things, that it was going to come back in an hour. An hour. My truck, with my keys that he stole from my pocket, lent to who knows who to do who knows what. I told him I was calling the police. Right now. And my mom got hysterical, screaming about how could I do that to my brother on Christmas, that it was just a small favor, that I always had to ruin everything. Eugene intervened, told them that what Colton did was theft, period, no matter if they were family or what day it was. My dad said we were overreacting, that Colton was going to bring the truck back, that there was no need for drama. Eugene pulled out his phone and said, "Well, I'm going to call then," and went to dial. My parents started begging him not to give Colton time to bring the truck back, that we'd work everything out as a family. We waited and waited. An hour passed, then 2. I was texting Colton, calling him, nothing, straight to voicemail. The snow kept falling outside. The roads were getting dangerous. Around 11:30 at night, we got the call. It wasn't Colton, it was the police. They had found my truck crashed into a snowbank on a rural road like 20 miles away. The driver, Colton, was drunk, with a blood, alcohol level like double the legal limit, and his license was suspended, which I didn't even know. There were no serious injuries, thank God, but the truck had significant damage, the front all smashed up, fluids dripping. It was a mess. The police arrested him right there for Dewey, driving with a suspended license, reckless driving, and vehicle theft, because when they checked the registration and contacted me, I confirmed that he didn't have permission to use the truck and that he had stolen my keys. My mom started crying. My dad was in shock. And I, honestly, felt this weird wave of emotions, like relief, vindication, and still anger because my truck was destroyed. Eugene put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Now he's going to have to face real consequences." And boy did he face them. Colton spent Christmas night in jail. They processed him on the 26th because the 25th was a holiday, and my parents had to borrow money from everywhere to pay bail, like they maxed out their credit cards, took from their 401k, borrowed from relatives. Eugene and I didn't give them a cent. Obviously. The Dewey was just the beginning, because then came the charges for the suspended license that apparently he had lost months ago for excess traffic violation points, the reckless driving, and the vehicle theft that I insisted on pressing because I was fed up, completely fed up with all this shit. My truck was totaled. Insurance covered it because I had full coverage, thank God. And with that money plus some of my savings, I was able to buy myself another truck. A used 2012 Chevy Silverado, that's in better condition than the Ford. So, in that sense, I came out ahead, I guess. But that wasn't the point, you know? The point was that my brother finally had to face the consequences of his actions, and my parents couldn't protect him from the law. The following months were a legal mess for Colton. He had to hire a lawyer, went to court multiple times, got probation, community service, defensive driving, and alcohol classes, and literally thousands of dollars in fines and legal fees. My mom called me crying like 2 weeks after everything happened, saying they were broke, that they had to use all their retirement money for bail and the lawyer. How could I do this to my brother? I told her I didn't do anything to Colton, that he did this to himself with his stupid decisions, and that if anyone should be angry, it was me for having to deal with years of his shit without any support from them. I hung up and blocked her number for a while. Colton eventually had to get a job, a real one for the first time in his life, delivering pizzas on a bicycle because he can't drive for a year due to the license suspension. He's still living with my parents because he can't afford anything else. And according to Eugene, who occasionally talks to my mom, he's bitter and angry with everyone, especially with me for pressing charges. I literally couldn't care less. About 3 months after all the drama, Colton sent me a message asking to borrow money to get back on his feet, that he'd pay me back when he could. I sent him a message back that said just one word, no, and blocked him too. My parents have been asking me to let Colton move in with me in Eugene's basement. They say he needs a fresh start away from them, that I could be a good influence on him. Eugene and I laughed when they told me that, like, do they really think I'm going to let that human disaster into my space? I told my mom that was never going to happen, that Colton made his bed and now he has to lie in it, and that if he wanted help, he should start by truly apologizing for everything. Not just saying sorry, but specifically acknowledging each thing he did to me over the years. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Colton doesn't have the capacity to admit he's wrong about anything. I cut contact completely with my parents and Colton, like 2 months ago. Deleted their numbers, blocked them on social media, everything. They still leave me voicemails from time to time, but I delete them without listening. Honestly, I'm not interested in what they have to say. Eugene tells me he's proud of me for setting healthy boundaries, that what I did was the right thing, and coming from him that means everything to me because he's the only adult in my life who's always truly supported me. Now I'm focused on my own life. Working, saving money, taking online classes. I'm considering eventually moving to my own apartment, but Eugene says there's no rush, to stay as long as I need. Honestly, I like living here. We get along well. We watch movies together on weekends, have barbecues in the summer. It's a comfortable and healthy situation. For the first time in my life, I feel at peace, without constantly worrying that someone's going to destroy or steal my stuff, without walking on eggshells trying to keep family peace. The freedom of not having that toxicity in my life is incredible. I can't even describe it well. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, pressing those charges against Colton, if I went too far. But then I remember the Game Boy, the bike, the iPod, the laptop, all the times my parents defended him and blamed me. I remember how my mom literally conspired to make duplicate keys so he could steal my truck, and then I know that yes, I did the right thing. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability. It was saying, no more. I'm not going to keep being your doormat. I'm not going to keep letting you walk all over me. And if that makes me the villain in my family's story, that's okay. I can live with that. I'd rather be the villain who set boundaries than the victim who kept taking abuse for the sake of keeping the peace. Last week I was washing my Silverado, putting on that wax that gives it extra shine, and my neighbor across the street yelled from his yard, "You like that truck, huh?" I smiled at him and said, "It's mine. I paid for it. Nobody can take it from me, and that's enough for now, I guess."